been a while since I played the legendary tier French battleship Bourgogne. In fact, I think the last time I extensively played this ship was before it got a buff. I can't remember what that buff was or when it occurred. I think it had something to do with improving the accuracy, maybe giving this thing American dispersion, if I recall correctly. Somebody can tell me in the comments. I tried researching it before I sat down to record this, but I kind of came up with nothing. It's a bit hard to parse through the litany of articles that Wargaming has released over the years when it comes to balance changes. Anyway, let me show you the commander build before the action here starts. We are running Azerlane Dunkirk with the special skill that allows us to switch between the AP and HE essentially instantly when the guns are fully reloaded. Very useful for this type of ship, which has smaller guns relative to other battleships at its tier, and does need to rely on HE sometimes, when enemy battleships especially are angled and you can't do much to them with the AP. This thing can do a pretty decent impression of a British battleship and burn things down. Although if I remember correctly, we are not going to be using too much HE in this battle, not for this first salvo certainly, against the Broadside Worcester, who also, if I remember correctly, is not exactly going to learn from the fact that he gets hit for nearly 17k there. I suppose it's just a matter of luck, RNG, or maybe subpar aim on my part, that 5 of those shells are overpens. Otherwise, I think he would have gone back to port. No matter though, he's still broadside, he hasn't angled at all, second salvo is out, kinda glad we did not waste the reload booster there, because there goes Worcester for the first blood. That's another Citadel to go with the first one, and 26,000 damage right off the bat. This battle, the way I got to it was a bit of an odyssey, by the way. I was trying to test out the newly buffed Hector and Smolin together, but I was having such terrible games that ended in one-sided blowouts and nothing happened, that I just started randomly playing other ships, and I ended up playing this thing about 4 or 5 times. Had a really good time with it, honestly, and pretty good results. The average damage I think I did across those battles was about 130,000. That seemed to be the floor of what I could get out of this thing, and most of them were wins. This just happened to be the best one, and it does turn into a little bit of a blowout, which I do try to avoid, but I think the damage numbers are pretty high, and the way we get to the damage is hopefully somewhat entertaining. It was at least fun for me to play this game in spite of the sort of obvious result. And at least for the moment, things don't exactly look obvious. We've lost a battleship, they've lost a cruiser, we know Rhode Island is lurking around here, and also a San Martin is somewhere behind him inside of a smoke screen. What we want to do is get on the Rhode Island's broadside, of course. That's where Bourgogne shines the most, when you can get the broadsides of the enemy ships. And a lot of people just wait for broadsides to come to them. I think that's a mistake. You got to put yourself in a place on the map where you've got access to the broadsides, which is why we're trying to climb up this flank here and put the island between ourselves and Rhode Island momentarily. He's reversing, and if we can push forward into this flank, there's a good chance that we can get his broadside. Plus, you might have noticed the Victoria lurking around the Bravo cap on the red team. I was a bit worried coming around this corner that he would be able to get our broadside as we went, but I don't know if he was paying attention to this part of the map after our friendly battleship went down. Yamato out there in the distance as well, sort of broadside to us, good to take note of him, and it just seems like the situation is developing for the majority of the enemy ships to come to this side of the map, so we don't want to do anything too reckless, like push straight in right at this moment, especially not with the Victoria there. I was also hoping we'd be able to access his broadside with this push, but I think he's slightly angled toward our position. Yamato, on the other hand, is broadside, but he's way far out there. I don't know that that salvo was properly aimed. Don't think it ends up hitting for too much. Well, about 8k, so not the worst thing in the world. And of course, we're not paying great attention to where we're sailing. We managed to hit the island there by not adjusting the rudder. But that's okay. It almost seems like that was on purpose, because what do you know? We've got Victoria flat broadside to us now. He's decided to push out, and this is the perfect position to punish that, except for the fact that we launch a lot of our shells into the rock, and then he starts to angle. Not ideal. We've also got Grosse Kerr first pushing in too, I suppose. So this might be a situation for the high explosive. but we also have to take into account the San Martin and, of course, the Rhode Island that are directly behind this island. And as much as I'd like to start shooting HE at either the GK or the now angled Victoria, we're going to have to deal with this Rhode Island, who hopefully by this time has forgotten about our presence. Well, he knows now. There's the radar, so I suppose we're revealed. And we're preparing to take some damage from him as he comes around the corner. But unfortunately for him, he is flat broadside, and I don't really know why he's not shooting at us. I can tell you, though, you don't want to be flat broadside against the Bourgogne like that, because it does have the main battery reload booster, which is probably the thing that makes it as powerful as it is. So there's Rhode Island taken out in the span of one salvo. And that 103,000 damage and 2 kills that we've done so far is only a little bit less than half of the final result we're going to get in this battle. And here comes a Marlborough pushing in. An attractive target, no doubt, much like the Rhode Island. If we can get access to that broadside, we might be able to shoot it back to port in one salvo, but it doesn't look like he's actually all that broadside to us right now. He seems to be slightly angled. We'll send a salvo out there, but of course somebody gets his broadside. HMS Incompetent, of course. Well, we'll call it HMS Incomparable for this battle. I think that guy does a good job. He doesn't really fit the name of HMS Incompetent. San Martin is still somewhere out there. Yamato's out there. And GK, too. 3 out of 4 of the enemy ships that are left alive here are on this side of the map. And finally, for the first time in this battle, we do switch to the HE, since Yamato is unfavorably angled. 8,300 damage from that salvo, but no fires. A little bit unfortunate, but of course, Bourgogne does have a very fast reload. I think it's around 22 seconds with the reload module. The only downside to this build, by the way, is we do have the reload module, but since we're using that skill that allows us to switch shells, that skill is in the same row as things like gyrating drill bits and crisscross. So we've really got nothing in the build that is buffing the turret traverse, and it's a little bit slow at 45 seconds, although that's something you can play around, and I think we do a decent job of playing around that in this battle. GK out there is now broadside to us, thanks to our position on this flank. We'll switch to the AP, courtesy of Azerlane Dunkirk, and I think the results on this salvo ought to be at least somewhat decent. I suppose they are. It could have been better. We're going to have to turn our attention, I think, though, to Yamato and San Martin. San Martin, of course, I've already reviewed that ship. I don't really feel like it's that much of a threat right here. The biggest thing it could do to us is hit us with torps, but I doubt that's happening since it comes out of the smoke screen, evidently completely unaware that we're right here. And, well, we've seen what happens when this ship gets broadsides. There goes the San Martin. That's 159,000 damage done, and all that's left on the enemy team is this mostly full health Yamato. Now this is perhaps not a sequence I'm super proud of. It's a bit unfortunate. Yamato's pushing into us. He knows it's all over for him. I don't know why he's angling the way he is, because he's going to expose the cheek, which you don't want to do. There's another couple citadels for us. What is that? 9 citadels now in this battle? 120 or 192,000 damage. Yamato still hasn't tightened up the angle. We can probably smack that cheek one more time, can we? Let's see. Yes, but it's not enough to take him out. It's an additional 2 citadels and 220,000 damage. But as you can see, we've sailed right into a scenario where Yamato can ram us. And that's unfortunate, because he's going to get a bunch of damage off of us doing that, frankly, I don't think he should have gotten if we had played that a little bit better and not simply allowed ourselves to be rammed like that. But we did, and we do 246,000. We can call it 220, because that's what it was before the ram, but 3,100 base XP, and I'd say Bourgogne is pretty good in the year 2026. The only couple of problems you really run into are the Yamatos and Incomparables when you're in situations where you can't really mitigate the damage and they can overmatch you everywhere. That's pretty unfortunate, but this thing is a broadside beater, no doubt. It is a pretty good ship. I don't know why I don't play it too often. Hope you enjoyed this video. This was about the only fun match that I played last night, so hopefully it was fun to watch. Give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.